Okay, welcome everyone to the Citizens Guide. On today's episode, Connor and I will discuss Joe Biden's pick for Attorney General, updates on the race to vaccinate the American public against COVID-19, and the aftermath of the violence at the US Capitol last week. And then following our discussion, you can listen to our interview with Professor Randy Moffett. We had an excellent discussion with him about Georgia's runoff results from their Senate special election. And it was just a great opportunity to hear from a professor of political science on these big issues. And then also, Connor has reminded me to remind all of our listeners to like and subscribe to the Citizens Guide on YouTube. And also, if you haven't subscribed where you listen to podcasts, please do that so that you can know when there's new episodes. Last week, we had a little special interview with Matthew Kenny. So if you weren't subscribed, you probably don't know about that. So yeah, go subscribe, like it, leave comments, leave reviews, only if they're positive. If you have bad reviews, speak to us privately. And okay, so that's all the housekeeping. First thing today, Connor, we have Joe Biden announcing Chief Judge Merrick Garland as his pick for Attorney General. A little bit about Judge Garland. He attended Harvard for both his undergraduate and his law degree. He was appointed by President Clinton to the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia and elevated to Chief Judge of that court by President Obama, who later nominated him to fill the Supreme Court seat of the late Antonin Scalia. But of course, we know the story. Leader McConnell refused to hold a single hearing, and thus we find ourselves in the political landscape of 2021. What are your initial thoughts about Judge Garland serving as Attorney General under a Biden administration?
I think he'll bring the much needed stability and sort of understanding of what the department's mission is and will be in the future, especially considering the events that happened at the Capitol. I think he'll steady the ship, so to speak, and like be an attorney general. And I think it's some poetic justice too that he will be confirmed. He'll face a confirmation vote before Mitch McConnell, and he'll get confirmed despite however Mitch McConnell votes.
I agree. He's been described as the model impartial judge. Honestly, he's probably a little bit moderate for our taste.
Yeah.
At least he is for mine, probably. Super qualified, though. I have no qualms about this. When he announced it, Biden said, quote, "You won't work for me. You are not the president's or vice president's lawyer. Your loyalty is not to me. It's to the law, the Constitution." And Garland went on to say, quote, "The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike, that there is not one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for friends and another for foes." So you can't ask for any better than that. Obviously better than any of Donald Trump's attorney general selections, from Jeff Sessions to Bill Barr. It's just been one disaster after another. So I'm excited for this. I
I'm
think this is
excited,
another good pick.
and I think it's relevant too that he announced after the Georgia race, when it was revealed that he'll be able to appoint his successor to the DC Circuit of Appeals.
Right. Yeah, no, that's important. I think he was probably down to two people for this spot, and one was for if we didn't win both seats in Georgia, and Garland was for if we did win both of them, because that's a good point. Without control of the Senate, we wouldn't be able to fill any judicial vacancies without Republican support, which probably just wouldn't have happened. So yes, I think this was a direct result of the Georgia results. Which, spoiler for the interview with Professor Moffett, the Georgia results were very good for Democrats. We won't talk about that a ton today, but the interview with Professor Moffett goes into it. So
There's still a virus circulating in
a
these.
global pandemic, some have said.
And the race to vaccinate against these two new strands, the South African and the British variants, The British one is confirmed to be 50% more transmissible. Not great, and we don't have the genomics sequencing to detect it in some municipalities. Um, so really, the only thing we have is to vaccinate as many people as possible before it takes a foothold. A stumbling occurred in Wisconsin where a pharmacist was arrested on charges that he intentionally sabotaged more than 500 doses of a vaccine. The pharmacist was an admitted conspiracy theorist who thought that the vaccine could harm people and alter their DNA. Not much to the story, really, but just sort of looking at the real world impacts of this mass disinformation campaign, tarnishing scientific achievement and sowing doubt when there really needs to be no doubt about the safety of these vaccines in a crucial point in our battle against the virus. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like you, this is a really unsettling story. It does raise questions about the security precautions being taken by hospitals, healthcare facilities, anyone with access to this vaccine. And I don't know the solution. And this isn't a widespread problem right now. You don't have, hundreds of these
Right.
cases happening every day, and that's good. And I expect that to remain the case. There needs to be increased security with this vaccine. It's too important um, to allow even these small 500 doses or whatever it was to get wasted, because that's 500 people that will face delayed vaccination, and potentially there will be deaths that are the result of that delay. Um, but yeah, like you said, not a lot to say about it. It's just an important story because, like you said, it ties into this larger narrative of the disinformation around the vaccines, the general American distrust of vaccines. There's a lot of people in this country who refuse to get flu shots, growing movements against vaccinations against common childhood diseases, just kind of this troubling thing that we talk about. A lot of people just not um, paying attention to generally accepted scientific fact.
hmm And then moving on to what we can expect in the coming months, Joe Biden has announced that he will reverse the Trump administration policy of reserving doses to ensure that people get their second dose and open the floodgates to say and vaccinate as many people as possible with the vaccines on hand. This is not explicitly the same as the British policy recently enacted, where they are delaying the second dose of the Moderna or Pfizer vaccines or the AstraZeneca vaccines, um, because Joe Biden says that he expects with this new policy and increased production in the coming months and using the Defense Production Act that they'll be able to close that gap between administering these doses and being able to manufacture more before the second dose is needed. So I think a good sign. I'm a little hesitant about not having a second dose available, but I do think it's important right now in this sort of crisis of these two variants and just the sort of rampant, widespread um, nature that the virus is taking right now that it's just important to get shots in the arm at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that it's not Biden unilaterally making
Right.
this decision to open the floodgates on the vaccine. He is the one that has the final say. Um, but you have to assume this was done in consultation with not only Vice President-elect Harris, but also the full, medical team, researchers associated with the transition, as well as probably consulting with some private sector hospital systems, and just kind of understanding um, the complexity behind distribution. And I assume someone or some group of people have basically assured him that those additional doses would be ready in time for the second doses to be given to people. It would be shocking if that's not the case, and I think that would be the result of the supply chain issues rather than Biden's choice to do this. And this kind of, to take it kind of larger, throughout the Trump era, and I'm hoping one day we can stop talking about Trump, but it doesn't seem likely. It felt like he was really the one driving everything. You know, for the most part, the big news stories were generated by him. He wasn't talking to people to figure out what the right or the proper or the intelligent choice, compassionate choice would be. It was just kind of a one-man show with kind of an orbit of people around him. And with Biden, that's just not the case. So I'm fully trusting this. The Biden is going to release his formal vaccination plan this coming week, so the week that this podcast airs. I'm excited for that. He's promised 100 million shots in 100 days. Um, that would be life altering for this country. That's 3 months basically of a third of the population. Depending on how you interpret 100 million shots, you're looking at still a massive part of the population getting vaccinated within 100 days. And fingers crossed that happens. I'm all for it. And if you even get close to 100 million, you're doing really well. So I'm
Yeah.
excited.
And then, like you said, a part of his formal plan that will also include, so be on the lookout for this week for announcements of federally run vaccination sites in places like high school gyms, sports stadiums, and more mobile units to reach their high risk population. So, part of a really an effort we haven't seen at any point in this pandemic to sort of take a federalized top down approach in managing this pandemic, which has been desperately needed since like March.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. And we don't have this on our agenda to talk about today, Connor, but there was that news story that you and I saw where Biden has advocated for increased deficit spending,
mhm,
and we'll get into that hopefully next episode when we have more time. But vaccine distribution is the ideal way to introduce increased deficit spending um, into the federal administration of this pandemic.
yeah,
So hopefully that can all kind of tie together, and the government can really work to get everybody vaccinated as quickly as possible. That should be goal number one.
yeah, yeah.